Hi, my name's Dr. Ken Resnick, and I'm an educational psychologist and family negotiator. I've become increasingly perturbed at the number of children, this growing group of kids, that are being diagnosed with all sorts of disorders, growing up lacking grit, lacking determination, feeling of entitlement, and with no joy in their lives. And all we're doing is carrying on assessing, diagnosing, medicating, with nobody stopping to think, but what is going on here? How can we have this growing group of kids carry on doing the same things that we've been doing for years and years, and yet nothing much is changing? So what I'm going to help give you some insight during this brief talk is to help you understand what our role is, the impact that parenting has on our child's development, and is actually at the root of all childhood development problems. That includes behavior and learning. Because remember, learning is a choice, but why are so many kids choosing not to learn? So I'm going to give you a short overview so that you can get some insight and maybe relate to what is happening to your children and why. Why are you having such a problem in disciplining your kids, keeping your authority because the kids are in control, screaming and shouting in most homes, chaos, and kids are not working anywhere near to their potential. I've just watched a documentary called The Social Dilemma, which is frightening because the world has gone mad. We're bringing up a generation of children that just lack motivation. They are getting carried away in a world of social media, a world of devices, games where they want to play all the time, that they're becoming addicted to, and nobody's stopping to say, wait a minute, we've got to be heading in the wrong direction. Statistics presented in the Netflix documentary The Social Dilemma and in the book The Coddling of the American Mind reveal some very concerning trends. And there's been a spike in the number of suicides with young girls, up 70%, with boys 25%. And I think this COVID lockdown has really brought the chickens home to roost, where parents all of a sudden have had their kids on their lap 24/7. Gender-based violence has increased, child abuse has increased, huge stress, because nobody equipped the parents for their role as parents. And never mind only parents, they had to turn into teachers as well. And with kids that were undisciplined, had no boundaries, had no yearning to learn, were just left to their own devices, it's proven to be a nightmare. And what I've found with the program, once parents are prepared to take on the responsibility, the program equips them with the skills and the tools to help them or help empower them to actually manage their kids in an effective way. Because at the end of the day, parenting is a job. It is a management job. Yet we don't know what we're doing. In other words, it's like baking a cake. We're the bakers. We've got the ingredients, which are our kids, born healthy, and yet we have not got the recipe. So we only try our best. And what happens? Like with any baker, baking a cake without the recipe, the chances are quite high that the cake will flop. By the time they're 16 and that cake has flopped, we are sitting with a problem. But what are we doing? Taking the analogy of the baker. We're sending the cake off to some scientist to try and work out what's wrong with the cake without ever looking at the baker. But what I have found, and the more I'm doing this program, virtually all childhood problems can be resolved if parents are prepared to take the responsibility, make the effort, work together, and help manage their children in a way that's going to equip them with the skills to take on life. So if we have a look, what is our role in actual fact? We need to understand what our role is. Because if we look at that statement, a child is someone who wants to become someone. Every human child is born facing life, itching to get out there. They're born with passion. They're born with a sense of curiosity. They're born with energy. They start crawling. They start walking. You see, young kids don't walk, they run. They just want to take on life. All of us wanted to take on life. Why is it that so much goes wrong? Nobody really develops to their full potential. What is the reason? The second statement. A child can only become an adult with the help of an adult. Note it says adult. It doesn't say parent. Adult. Any adult can bring up a child. Children can't bring up themselves. They're totally dependent on an adult to bring them up. Could be a step-parent. Could be a foster parent. Could be an adopted parents that adopted the children, etc. But it needs to be an adult. Here we're stuck because this truism is totally being ignored in the training of all professionals, where the whole approach is let's take the kids out, let's analyze the kid, let's not even worry about the parenting. And all these disorders, from ADHD to oppositional defiant, etc., are just symptomatically diagnosed. They can't find a brain problem, be just thumb-sucking with medication. And of course, medication can work in the sense that it'll calm a kid down. Is it going to motivate a kid, help them be fired up to really take on life? No. So we've got to now get down to basics. And as a matter of fact, if our ancestors parented like we're parenting now, we would be extinct. So we are overprotecting our kids, allowing them sit on devices for far too long, hang around with adults far too much, not socialized, opting out, not wanting to go to school, not keen to learn, choosing not to read. We've got a huge problem. How do we stimulate children? How can we help them become more motivated, to develop a passion to want to learn? We're born with a brain. We're born to learn. But what is going wrong? So if we have a look, we as parents are the key role players in dealing with and resolving all behavioral and emotional problems in our children. It is our responsibility. And if we have a look, parenting can be seen as educative activities. Now, what do we mean by educative activities? I mentioned earlier that virtually all other parenting programs, sort of psychological activities, helping you deal with a child's behavior. We are educators, together with teachers, which I'm going to explain in a moment. In other words, we should be equipping kids with the necessary skills needed to survive. Now, where have you heard any parent telling you that they're bringing their kid up to survive in order to confront and deal with all the challenges that life is going to present to them? That is our role. And they are our indicator in terms of how well we're doing the job. In other words, they accompany us on a journey into adulthood. They are sort of barometer to give us an idea of how well we're doing by how they're responding. So if they're lacking grit, they're lacking motivation, they've got attitude, they're cheeky, they just want to sit in front of the TV, we are doing something wrong. We've got to understand that. And we've also got to understand our role as a guide. Because to give an example, if we as a group had to go into the Amazon, we're totally dependent on a guide who has knowledge of the environment. If that guide sees something, starts panicking, runs, screams at everybody, that whole group is going to have a problem. And we adults. So you can imagine with kids, if their guide is someone that they can't really trust, that loses it, that starts screaming and shouting, we are going to end up with what we're ending up with now, chaos. So if we have a look, we talk about the educative role of parents and teachers. So basically, to go back, let's have a look at the Khoisan. There's a nice photo of them there. The Khoisan are parenting like they have for ages. Their sole role is to equip their kids with the skills to handle that hostile environment, to recognize what they can, what they can't eat, to hunt, to take shelter, to build shelters. You're not going to find an ADHD Khoisan child, or an oppositional defiant Khoisan child, or depressed Khoisan child, because that is what it was right at the beginning, where parenting was instinctive. But what has happened? We've got too clever. We were born with a brain, but unfortunately it's a rational brain, which makes it problematic, because with parenting, 1 and 1 does not add up to 2. So as a result, we do the best for our kids, giving them far too much, thinking they'll be happy, giving in to them because we're going with their feelings all the time. We don't want them to be sad, and we've got to now talk in a different tone to try and make them happy. But it's not how it should be. We've got to help kids deal with life, deal with disappointments, learn to persevere, learn to maintain that passion, that sense of curiosity, the determination to be well socialized. That is what we're supposed to do. But we are not doing that because it's not common sense. The educative role of parents, we are the primary educators. As I mentioned, we're equipping them with skills to deal with their life. Teachers are secondary educators. They are imparting knowledge, getting children to learn about the world, to learn what's going on around us, different subjects, languages, etc., etc. Unfortunately, in the training of teachers, there is nothing on parenting. What does that mean? That means when they've got a class full of kids and they're having problems, their first response is to have the kid assessed. They're not looking and trying to understand that this poor little guy in the back has no friends, sitting on his own, never puts up his hand, not performing well, has got an issue. He's got to have an issue. Why? But what do? They just let the parents know something's wrong with this child. They need help. So this is what's happening. And more kids are going for help. And we genuinely don't know what we're doing. So what has really, in fact, happened from the time when our ancestors were parenting out of instinct? As we've evolved, the emphasis has now shifted where the focus is on the child. And the adult-child educative relationship has been sidelined. Doesn't exist. Parents are sitting on the side where it's become the norm to say, no, my kid's in therapy. And yours? No, mine's on medication. It's become like this is the norm. This is the norm. It's abnormal for kids not to be on medication. And nobody's questioning it. Because I think the majority of parents are quite happy to hear that somebody's going to sort their child out. And unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. And there's lots and lots of money being spent on all these assessments, very little improvement without anybody stopping to think, but whoa, we've got to be going in the wrong direction. And an even bigger worry is that the universities are training psychologists pretty much like they've been trained for years and years and years. Educational psychologists being trained the same way to assess kids, to diagnose kids, and to give the kid therapy, with no training on the parenting. And it's very, very worrying because I think anybody can have a look at what's going on and say, wait a minute, we're doing something wrong. How can we carry on doing a job every day with so little movement or positive result in the child and nobody stopping to question? This was unheard of years back. Kids survived. I know when we were at school, it was the kids that really came from poor homes that were deprived, that didn't do well at school. But now, so many kids are not doing well at school. And there's a reason for it. Many of you might have heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Well, there's a hierarchy of needs for children as well. And what do I mean by self-actualizing? So if you take an example, a 6-year-old self-actualizing can't wait to go to school, can't wait to read, can't wait to do maths, can't wait to get involved in a situation where they want to try their best. They pick themselves up if they lose, want to try harder, behave appropriately, are well socialized. That's all we want. Because if they're not, we start having issues. And there are many kids that are crying when they're taken to school. But there's a hierarchy of needs that need to be met in order for children to self-actualize. Because of time restraints, I'm only going to deal with the bottom two because we are getting stuck. So their basic needs are their physical needs. Every human child needs to be fed and needs to be clothed. So a child that is hungry, starving, on the streets, freezing cold, got a brain, achieves nothing, can't be taught. Because unless we meet that need, with that brain, they can't be taught. And if Einstein was born on the streets, there was no ways he could have been Einstein. But virtually, all functional families meet that need. Once we have met that need, the next need is to help a child feel emotionally safe. In other words, the child is totally dependent on their parent knowing what they're doing. And if you know what you're doing, you know how to stay calm. An example of the guy that I spoke to you about. He can't panic. But however, in the majority of homes today, from my experience, there's screaming and shouting. When there's screaming and shouting in a home, the children do not feel safe. And if they're not feeling safe, they're going to become insecure. The parenting is going to be inconsistent. And we're going to have problems because once we got a bit of chaos, once we got that anxiety in the home, all of a sudden the kids are showing up with learning difficulties, showing up with the symptoms of ADHD or oppositional defiant disorder or the latest, which is an anxiety disorder. And we're not even questioning it. We've all got a bit of anxiety. Kids are not born with an anxiety disorder, but how can we not relate that to the parent? A very anxious mom that really is not coping, those children are going to be anxious. And when kids are being diagnosed with an anxiety disorder, placed on some hectic medication, and where the parent's told, well, there's nothing you can do about it because it's either genetic or something else, just be very careful. Pussyfoot around the child because they're very sensitive. Well, how is the parent going to be able to carry out their role in a confident manner where they know and feel safe with what they're doing and confident with what they're doing? So we're getting stuck on the second need. And that is why there are so many kids that are not going any higher They're not wanting to learn. They learn because they have to. They learn because they're told to. They're being helped when they come home. In other words, they've got no real need to want to learn, to want to read. And it's becoming a problem, and nobody seems to be picking this up. I was 20 years at a private school as the psychologist and counselor, and I did hundreds of these psycho-ed assessments, maybe even thousands. What I've observed in all the kids and families that I've seen is that kids with whatever disorder they're diagnosed with, whatever learning problem they're diagnosed with, have problem characteristics. So let's have a look. So the first one is that they only tend to like to do what they enjoy doing. The moment they're not interested, Mom, I need help. Mom, I don't want to. Mom, I can't. I can't, Mom. I can't. Help me. They need Mom to be sitting in a room while they're playing. They're not letting Mom out of their sight. So as a result, they're being given things just to keep them quiet because shame. They are unhappy and they do feel a bit sad because it's hard. So without realizing, what are we actually doing? The moment a kid is given things, activities that only they enjoy doing, life is about taking the challenge of things that we don't like doing. And what is happening? These kids lack perseverance. Because the moment the going gets tough, they're out of there. Mom has to help, Dad has to help. And then we got a problem. They come home, Mom helped me with my maths. They haven't opened the book. They're not taking up the challenges. So they're giving up. And that opting out is a huge problem. You'll find that kids with learning difficulties opt out. They can't because they don't even think they can. And that becomes a huge problem. So what happens? They start avoiding challenges. The moment they're unsure of the outcome, they'd rather not do it. Whatever the activity is, they need to not want to run a race in case they come last, or swim in a gala because in case they come last. They don't want to play a sport because they lose. They don't win, and they don't enjoy not winning. So they tend to avoid challenges. And on top of that, they start developing a fear of failure where they believe that they don't have the ability. They believe that they don't have the intelligence to maybe cope, and they're scared to even try. So the opting out becomes a big problem. And what I do with parents, when I tell them these characteristics, they all nod their heads. They say, that's my child. But what does it mean? It means that these kids are very dependent on somebody who is being there to help them, which is usually the parent. If it's not the parents, it's an extra lesson teacher or some remedial teacher. When I see parents, normally with younger kids, when I'm doing the program, helping them with the structures and so on, there are two things that seem to happen when the kids walk in. I've got a bowl of sweets that I leave open. They're these mints that have an easy-to-open wrapper. But the one thing is that the child sits on Mom or Dad's lap. I say to them, listen, you can sit on my lap or next to Mom and Dad. Well, what do you think they do? Sit next to Mom and Dad because they can. What must a 6-year-old be sitting on your lap for? Even a 3-year-old. They can sit next to you. And it's important that from an early age, you start doing that. But the second thing they do, they see these bowl of sweets. Very few children go and put their hand in and take a sweet. The ones that do, I say to them, hey, I said, whose sweets are those? They pull their hand out, go and hide behind Mom. But the majority walk around the sweets, whisper to their Mom or their Dad. And I say to Mom, what do they want? They'd like a sweet. They've got to ask me. You can't believe the number of children that will not ask me, but they don't get a sweet. A few months ago, I had a 6-year-old. He must have walked around that table 5 or 6 times. Kept on saying to him, you've got to ask me. He would not ask me. Eventually, at the end of the session, he sort of mumbled, excuse me, may I have a sweet, please? Children today have not heard those words. He asked me, may I have a sweet, please? Mine. Took the sweet, gave it to his Mom. I said, what you doing? He says, I can't open it. I said, well, put it back. He opened it in 2 seconds because he can. What does he do with the wrapper? Gives it to Mom. The dustbin's right next door. Next to him. No, you put it in yourself. It starts with those little things. We're doing far too much for our kids, which they should be doing for themselves. Now, that dependency is the key problem with children having difficulties, having issues, having learning problems. Dependent children don't feel good about themselves. They have low self-esteem and they lack self-confidence. So they go to school not feeling that confident, not putting their hand up in class because they're always having to have help. And we're not even noticing this. We're not even helping parents or making parents aware that the more dependent we make a child, the more helpless we're making those children. So what do we mean? I came across a term called learned helplessness. And I suggest that you Google that term and read about it. They've done quite a lot of research regarding learned helplessness in children. It was coined by a psychologist called Martin Seligman. They've done a lot of research. And what they've found is a lot of the characteristics that I've observed. So we're encouraging children to actually give up without realizing it. Because so many kids are going to school because they have to rather than they want to. And when they don't have to listen in class, because when they come home, somebody's going to help them, whether it's mom or au pair or extra lessons. And there are schools that are offering extra lessons to grade ones. Every grade one can read if they're healthy and can add up 1 and 1, but yet they need extra lessons. So without being aware of it, we're encouraging kids to give up. What is this doing? This is having a huge impact on their grit and determination, which are key factors in success in life. They are the key factors, and we've got to install kids with grit and determination, and nobody's showing us how. And if we don't do it early on and they become teenagers, well, they just give up. They're going to go nowhere. Because if they become adults and they want to learn how to have grit and determination, they're going to have to sit in therapy. But they don't have the grit or determination to see through therapy. And it is all about parenting. You can see it in the quality of leaders that we're having. That pool is getting smaller and smaller. As I mentioned earlier on in my introduction, we've adopted a safety-first mentality to keep kids safe, to make sure that we don't hurt their feelings, to make sure that they don't struggle too much because they're feeling sad, etc. So we actually, without realizing it, we're encouraging the dependency and the helplessness. What is the consequence of that? It then develops into unacceptable behavior as well as learning difficulties, where again they're opting out. Why should they? Somebody else is going to do it for them. Why should they learn? They don't want to. So we're encouraging this with the parents, and we're sitting with this huge problem. And that is why kids are growing up. Social media is causing a major problem, as I mentioned earlier, with girls. Kids lacking joy, evidently hospitals, the amount of cases that are being, of kids being admitted, young girls that are really cutting themselves, doing all sorts of things. And nobody's stopping to think, but why? Why? Never used to happen. So parenting skills need to be acquired. And that is what this program does. It gives you an understanding. We cannot be perfect parents. Why? Because we were brought up by parents who only tried their best, but they didn't know what they were doing. Did they ever acknowledge that they screwed up? They make you feel bad when they brought you into the world and they screwed you up, but you got to appreciate them forever. And then you marry someone. That's also not okay. So the odds of having a perfect child are not going to happen. But we can be a good enough parent. And that is what's really, really important. So what are my concerns? I just believe that we are heading in the wrong direction. We've got to stop. Because if we don't stop, again, looking at that movie, we are really destroying ourselves. Generations that are going to basically just destroy themselves. So the usual approach is that teachers will phone up parents. Listen, we're really worried about your kid. They disrupt the class. Sure, they got ADHD. So many grade 1 teachers believe they're qualified to diagnose ADHD. There's learning difficulties. There's poor concentration. They're zoning out. They're daydreaming. And they're not completing their work. What are they supposed to do about it? Well, parents get very confused. They don't know what to do, but they are told, go and have an assessment. Usually a psych-ed assessment done by an educational psychologist. And from these assessments, all or some of these recommendations are made. Occupational therapy, speech therapy, play therapy, extra lessons, and possibly medication, in which case they've got to go and see a psychiatrist. These kids are recommended for these therapies, and the role of the parent is omitted. So what happens? They either put on medication, very little change is experienced, and 2 or 3 years later they've got to go through the same assessments with maybe slightly different recommendations. But how can the role of the parent be omitted from this? Parenting has a huge impact on the child's development. And here we can see the parenting aspect is ignored while we're just sending them off for this therapy with absolutely none of the therapists being able to tell the parents what they need to do to parent a child that's been diagnosed. For instance, if a parent goes to the occupational therapist, the play therapist, and the speech therapist and asks them, what do I do as a parent? They'll get 3 different replies, which is really concerning because parents become confused, anxious, and the problem is exacerbated. Parenting is all about management. It's a management job. We're running our little business, which is our family, the kids are employees. We've got to know what we're doing. It is only a job. It gets contaminated by being too emotionally involved, but our job is to equip kids to take on life. That's all it is. So there are a number of parenting styles. I've named quite a few there, but I'm only going to dwell on the one, the laissez-faire, the free and easy sort of parenting, where there's chaos in the home. There's no boundaries. Kids can watch TV whenever they like, go to the fridge, take out what they like, leave a mess, leave toys lying around, shout, scream, etc. Now, those kids have got to go into a classroom that's structured, where they've got to listen to the teacher, etc. The odds of them concentrating are not going to be that high. As a result, parents are going to be fine. Listen, we're just worried about your kid. It doesn't seem to be concentrating. He's very jumpy. Well, what do? An assessment. Parenting looked at? Not at all. So all these styles, which I'm not going to speak about now, but which I deal with in the parenting masterclass, can create the dependency, the lack of motivation, the fear of failure, the low self-esteem, the opting out, the helplessness, the grit, no perseverance, which in itself can then manifest into your attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder, your oppositional defiant disorder, your incaprices, which is soiling, bedwetting, school refusal, and virtually a whole range of disorders that are being diagnosed with kids. This can happen because of parenting. And what I've found is that when parents are given the tools and take responsibility, we've had success right across the board with some of those conditions or disorders that nobody can deal with, like soiling, etc. So how can we ignore this? Because if we have a look, the problem with the child-centered approach, which has been adopted by virtually all professionals when dealing and therapizing children, is that there are limitations and a lot to be concerned about. Number one, they're very expensive, and the process often requires years of therapy. Far too many kids are being incorrectly diagnosed and labeled with a variety of disorders and often put in remedial classes and or meds. It tends to disempower parents in that the professionals are giving parents the idea that it's not the parenting. The parenting has nothing to do with the problem, that it is the child and they will sort the child out. As a result, it generates a huge amount of anxiety when parents don't see much improvement, and their anxiety definitely exacerbates the problem with their child. And virtually all disorders are symptomatically diagnosed, from ADHD to oppositional defiant disorder to anxiety disorders, depression, and many others. It's a very slow and long process, often with children 3 years in occupational therapy, and limited in that it doesn't turn the child's life around. Parents, again, often receive conflicting advice from various professionals regarding their involvement with the child. And I think the most concerning thing is that it tends to encourage learned helplessness, especially with children that are put in remedial classes, where they are given the message that there'll always be somebody there to help them. So without being aware of it, we are encouraging helplessness, where a child can just turn to somebody for help. And the only approach advocated in the training of all professions qualified to work and give therapy to children is the child-centered approach. And medication does nothing for changing that personality of a child into a motivated, confident child who wants to do his work and is well motivated. So positive aspects of the child-centered approach is that parents are made aware that there are issues with their children that have to be addressed. Medication can be effective for certain children, and the different therapies do have various degrees of success. I have developed a very effective parenting program, which I've called the Smarta Choice Parenting Program, which, as the name implies, is a parent-centered approach, which is culminating in huge success, and it is definitely an alternative to the child-centered approach. Some of the positives that we're experiencing from the program is that it empowers parents. It brings the parents in as the key role players in guiding the child to adulthood. And as a result, the parents are able to virtually deal with all childhood developmental problems, including ADHD, ADD, anxiety, soiling, bedwetting, sibling rivalry, school refusal, and many others. Significant positive change in children is experienced within a very short period of time. As a result, anxiety in the home diminishes, parents feel more in control, and the house calms down. Very importantly, it helps parents understand their role in instilling grit and determination in their child. It's practical and easy to implement. It's affordable and very effective. It only consists of one session. It reduces and eliminates the need for the traditional child therapy and medication. It's compatible with all cultures and religions. You end up with respectful, responsible, and confident children with high self-esteem and who are highly motivated. As a result, their school performance improves. It eliminates shouting and screaming. As a result, we have a calm home with very cooperative children. Helps parents parent from the same page. And it works well across all adults involved with children. The few negatives that we have experienced that we do need to make parents aware of is that the parents do have to take responsibility for implementing and managing the program. Parents also need to understand and take full responsibility for the healthy development of their child, and you don't outsource the parenting management job to teachers and professionals. You can work with teachers, but you don't just outsource and put the problem on the teacher and professionals' lap. Parents have to understand they are the most important role players. So that is what the program's about. It's helping parents understand their role and how much change they can bring about in their families if they are given the tools to manage their children appropriately. So the whole idea of the program, how do we parent effectively, is to understand that everything a child does is a choice. So the key to this approach is to allow your child to make choices, but they've got to understand the consequences of bad choices. To give you an example, we haven't learned by society. Society operates with rules and consequences. We have a good idea that if we commit a crime or break a law, what the consequences are going to be. We can use talking on our cell phone in the car as an example. We stopped by a cop, 500 Rand fine. We know what the consequences are. But imagine if we didn't. And we hear that a friend gets off with a bribe, we try our luck, and we put in jail for 30 years. How is society going to function? Yet that is how we parent. We react, we threaten, we warn. If you do that once more, I'm warning you. I'm not going to speak again. And then boom, we blow up. How can that create any stability in a family? It's like a motorboat without a rudder. We're going to be all over the place. The kids are going to be all over the place. So what do I mean by making choices and spelled out consequences? I had the privilege of marrying Mel, who had 3 kids, twins, Zoe and Erica, who were age 3 at the time, and Adam, age 6. We've implemented the program and experienced incredible success, ending up with some highly motivated, very successful young adults. To give you an idea, in our family, we had a rule that if I'd recorded a TV program and the kids wanted to delete it, they had to ask me. If they didn't, meant that they didn't want to watch TV for a week. Simple as that. Anyway, one day, a movie I recorded had been deleted. Turned out to be Erica. Called her and I said, X, I don't believe you don't want to watch TV for a week. She said, why? I said, well, you deleted my program. She accepted it. But after 3 days, she came to me and she said, Ken, when can I watch TV again? And I said, X, I wanted you to watch during all the agreed times. But when you deleted that movie, you said to me that you don't want to watch TV for a week. So it's a week. No arguments, no problems. She accepted it. So in this way, what change takes place? Children then learn to own their own problems and take responsibility for their choices where you can stay calm. It's a mind shift change. I didn't talk down to Erica. I didn't threaten her. I didn't talk to her with a big finger. She owned the problem. She accepted it. It was a deal we made. So you need to negotiate rules, boundaries, etc. with your kids and spell out the consequences and then get their buy. So the whole idea is to understand how do we make it their problem. So how do we speak to kids? This is where we are going wrong. We're not like I spoke to Erica. We're speaking down to kids. And no kid likes to be spoken down to. No adult likes the big lecture. It doesn't really work. So the whole idea is to know, don't go off at them. Don't threaten them. Don't make them apologize. Don't try and work out why they made the decision. Like for instance, I had one mom, kid chose to go to his bedroom. When he came out, they wanted to know the reason why, what made him behave that way. You do nothing. You just put it to bed. Short and sweet. In other words, consequences need to be short and sweet, and they take the consequence. But when they've had the consequence, they join the family. There's no problem. We've got to get into that mindset. We don't have to go into big lecture time. So at the end of the day, what we've got to understand is your child was not born a terror, impossible, hyperactive, out of control, spoiled, lazy, ungrateful, rude. You have to believe that your child does have potential as well as the ability to succeed. Your child is a person who needs someone like you to help them reach their potential. Your child is a person who's dependent on you to help them to become independent. And your child is a person who can and must take responsibility for the choices they make. So with that, I need to tell you maybe more about the actual parenting masterclass. The parenting masterclass is aimed at parents with kids as young as 1 all the way through to teenagers. Implementing the program when children are very young makes it so much easier than when they reach adolescence. The Smarta Choice parenting program works across all cultures and religions, delivers quick results by providing powerful parenting tools, techniques, and framework which will help you guide your child to adulthood. The Parenting Masterclass teaches you how to stay calm and parent confidently by allowing your child to make choices and be accountable for clear, preemptive consequences. It builds relationships of mutual trust, mutual respect, and mutual understanding with your child while you are able to maintain your authority. You stop shouting, screaming, and give long lectures which never work. You are able to effectively discipline your child without ever punishing them. You are able to then raise independent and confident children who are filled with purpose and determination to succeed in life. And on top of that, you can effectively deal with virtually all childhood behavioral and learning challenges, including when your child refuses to eat supper, brush their teeth, sleep in their own bed, backchat, temper tantrums, sibling rivalry, or any of the disorders that have been diagnosed. You're confidently able to guide your child to adulthood. You're able to speak to your child in a respectful manner, and they have respect for you. You're able to then parent in a fair and consistent manner that delivers positive results in a very short period of time. The on-demand e-learning parenting masterclass includes my published ebook, Parenting Decoded, which is available on Amazon, the Parenting Masterclass course playbook and implementation guide. You'll have free access to the monthly live question and answer session with the Smarta Choice parenting training experts, where you can ask or submit any parenting questions you may have. You got lifetime access to the e-learning parenting masterclass to watch or review whenever you want. At the end of the program, you will receive a certificate of completion. You are welcome to claim your on-demand parenting masterclass discount by using the promotional code listed in the link below. Parents that have completed the masterclass have experienced significant positive change in their children within a very short period of time. Right, well, I hope that you found the insights that we shared with you valuable and that you are able to implement some of the ideas at home. My name is Dr. Ken Resnick, and you are very welcome to contact the Smarta Choice parenting team if you need any assistance or have any questions. We look forward to seeing you at our next Parenting Masterclass.